This is Rob Long with Martini Shot for the Ankler. Not long ago, I woke up and had an impossible time trying just to stand upright. I was dizzy and sick and spent some time collapsed in bed and some time throwing up, and I was eventually convinced to go to the emergency room and present myself, listing sideways for examination. And it turns out I had vertigo, which was terrible, but better than the alternative, which was a massive debilitating stroke. And what I learned about vertigo was that there are three basic types. There's something called benign positional, which you get if you knock your head around a bit, and ironically, it gets better if you knock your head around a little bit. And there's the inflammation kind, and that gets better when you take steroids. And then there's something called neuritis, which doesn't get better so much as just fades away when your brain compensates like 7, 8 weeks later. And which I found out later, neuritis is sort of a made up word anyway, because sometimes doctors just don't know what caused the vertigo and they hate that, so they make up a word. People in show business do this too. They call it something like second act jeopardy or something. But that's the kind I had, the neuritis kind, the third unknown kind. And I know this because I banged my head around and I took prednisone and it did not go away. And also, I did a lot of weird exercises like dart my eyes back and forth and snap my head from side to side like a demented runway model, trying to wake up that nerve that connects the inner ear to the brain and is the reason why we don't all lurch around like we're on a small boat in high seas. And another thing I learned was this: when you go to the emergency room and tell them that you're dizzy and falling over and vomiting, they immediately send you to what they call the stroke team. That's how alarmed they are, how urgent it is. In fact, it's so alarmed and urgent that they do this before even getting your insurance information. And when they do admit you to the hospital for tests, you are quickly, nearly naked in a bed, surrounded by the neurological team who ask you questions and demand that you follow the pen they're holding as it moves from side to side. And here's what I'm going to say now. And these are two things. And one of them is the kind of thing that people sometimes, get fired for. And the other is an observation about show business, and I'll let you figure out which one is which. So I wake up in a hospital bed, still dizzy and sick, at about 6 a.m., and I'm surrounded by about a dozen young doctors because they haven't ruled out a stroke, and I'm in the hospital. I'm still, I'm nervous, I'm on edge, and I'm confused about what's happening to my brain, in my brain. And then I wake up and I see a crowd of doctors around me for my neurological consult. And every single young doctor is either Asian or South Asian. And the first thing that went through my mind was, I'm going to be okay. I mean, obviously, that's the thing I was going to say that was going to get me into trouble, but it is the truth. So there you go. When you're in the hospital with a brain malfunction, it's reassuring to think about all the pressure and parental expectation and academic competitive trauma that your doctors have endured on the way to your bedside. Okay, now the second thing I noticed was this: that the doctors are all young and clean and attractive and fit and thoughtful, and they're very well put together. And along with them is another doctor, the real one, I guess, because this is a teaching hospital and these are medical students or residents or however it works. I've never figured out how it works, but she's also young and clean cut and attractive. And they're just a really impressive group of young doctors, and they're all in scrubs and they behave. And here's the thing: they behave exactly like they're supposed to, exactly like the doctors on television shows, because, of course, they've seen those shows too. They know how to act like doctors because they've watched doctors on doctor shows. And they're here in my hospital room, camera ready. And my doctors were to a person young enough to have watched the first season of the TV show House, probably in their pajamas on a school night after the extra homework and the cello lessons. And I'm sure they thought while watching that show, I want to do that. Or Grey's Anatomy, although I'm guessing about that because I didn't really get into their personal lives because mostly we were focusing on me. But that is what TV can do, right? Or used to do. Give people a frame for their aspirations. I mean, how many young people watched Friends and thought, I am going to live that life in the big city with my friends and a hangout. And what more could I want? So there I am in my hospital bed, clutching my gown closed around me like a ravaged Victorian maiden. And they're asking me questions to figure out why I'm falling down dizzy. Questions like, did you bump your head? Did you take anything? And then one doctor asks me this: did you get your hair cut recently? and everything stops. His colleagues stare at him with unfriendly curiosity because this is a question they did not expect. And he is clearly the brilliant shark of a student. There's always one in the cast, right? In a medical TV show cast. And this is a medical TV show, and they are a medical TV show cast. And he has asked an interesting and unexpected question, and they all just so obviously hate him. And then I say, because it's true, yes, as a matter of fact, I did that day. And the rest of the neurologists look at him with just rage in their eyes. And he shrugs like the brilliant jerk that he is. And he says, well, in many cases, at a hair salon, when they lean your head back to shampoo it, it can sometimes trigger benign positional vertigo. And then he smiles as if to say, I am the star of this week's episode. So I let him do that for a bit. I let the whole moment go on. And then, because I have been in a writer's room for 35 years, I wait a few more beats, even beyond that, before I say, actually, I went to a regular barbershop, no shampoo. And then equilibrium was restored among the stroke team, and everybody looked happy except me, of course, and him. But now it's clear that they have no idea what really happened to my brain. And tests confirmed ultimately no stroke, just vertigo. And that's when the regular consults with the camera ready stroke team just stopped. Because when they can't fix something, doctors just lose interest. I was maybe a B story in the show, maybe just a cold open, and I was discharged a few hours later and wheeled onto the short story beat, just cut for time. And it took actually about 7 weeks before I felt normal. Instead of 47 minutes plus commercials and promos, which is what I had been led to expect was the time it takes to be completely healed by attractive young doctors, and what I imagine they sort of expect too. Now, it turns out you can't drive with vertigo or focus on a page for longer than 15 or 20 minutes, which means that writing was a pain. So, in a way, I got my longtime wish, which was an ironclad excuse for not doing the thing that I'm supposed to do. So, instead, I just sort of sat and I thought for a few weeks, which was challenging because while I enjoy sitting, I'm not really crazy about thinking. And here's what I thought about: I thought about vertigo itself, which, to be honest, had it happened to somebody else, I would have been sympathetic, of course. I'm not a monster mostly. But I mean, vertigo, really? Like, that's an actual thing and not just one of those made up things people say they have? Some kind of psychosomatic thing? I mean, they call it neuritis, which is pretty close to neurotic. That can't be a coincidence, can it? But I learned the hard way it actually is a real thing, which caused me to be a little less dismissive of the people in my life who have mystery ailments and exotic allergies. Put it this way: if vertigo exists, who am I to doubt your gluten allergy or your lactose intolerance or your long COVID? And then I thought this, that I spend a lot of my time trying to get people to agree to pay me to write things, and then a lot of time trying to get the people who are paying me to stop asking me where those things are, which leaves very little time for the actual writing part of my life as a writer. But mostly I thought this. I thought about my stroke team, about how they all behaved exactly the way they were supposed to, exactly the way I saw and they saw on TV, which suggests that TV really does have a powerful influence on the way we act and do our jobs, treat each other. Or it did, I guess, when we were all watching pretty much the same thing, pretty much at the same time. I mean, my young neurologist, I am certain, watched doctor shows on television, but I'm also certain that they watched those shows with other people, and that those images of Dr. House and his team saving lives, or Grey's Anatomy, or ER, or Chicago Hope, or whatever it was that got those neurologists into scrubs, that those shows were shared and digested with a group or a family, even. I mean, I know some young, or at this point not so young, gay men and women whose lives were transformed and enlarged by the simple act of watching Will and Grace, knowing other people were watching it too, or watching it with friends and family, listening to the audience laughter and thinking, well, I guess I'm not alone. I'm not sure anybody watches TV like that anymore. I'm not sure we're putting things on to encourage that anyway. And I'm not sure what we've lost or if we've lost anything, but it really is different. On the other hand, it's not like those neurologists cured me or anything. Maybe a little less time watching TV and going to Barry's boot camp, and old Rob would have been fixed up fast. And that's it for this week. Next week, on the road for the Ankler. This is Rob Long with Martini Shot.